Bang
Yeah, that's
on
present.
with what
Damn
the Bible
shit.
plainly teaches us.
Slap that
You're
slut.
compromising
China!
what the Bible actually says,
Yes.
how God did it.
That's right. And importantly, when you do compromise like that, you introduce millions and millions of years of whatever's happening before Adam and Eve are even created. And the Bible says they came on the sixth day of creation. Now, God is powerful and purposeful, and when he speaks, his word goes out and accomplishes exactly what he intended. So his purpose in creating the universe was to make a home for man, who has been made in his image, the Bible tells us. So it makes no sense at all to have this universe sort of randomly pottering along for billions of years before God finally gets around to creating mankind in his image. So it actually cuts across any sense of God being purposeful. So if the Big Bang is true, then the Bible is not. But if the Bible is true, then the Big Bang is not.
So is there any observational support for the Big Bang?
Well, the Big Bang came about through astronomers making observations, but with a perspective, a philosophical bias, if you like, that they were looking for mechanisms of explanation which excluded God. So back in the early 1900s, I think it was 1916 or thereabouts, Vesto Slipher discovered that galaxies had their spectra shifted towards the red end of the spectrum. Now, that doesn't mean they were red, it just means that the spectra was slightly shifted that way. Now, he interpreted that as possibly due to recession, like Doppler shift. In 1929, Edwin Hubble observed that the further away galaxies were, the more they were redshifted. So he interpreted that as meaning they were receding from us faster and faster. So you get this picture of an expanding universe. Now, interestingly, Hubble didn't like what he was seeing, because in every direction that he looked, he saw the same phenomenon, these receding galaxies, which implied that the Earth was somehow or other in a favoured or special location, at or near the centre. And he actually said, this is an unwelcome supposition, and must be opposed at all costs, which is, I guess, revealing of his philosophical position. Because, of course, if the Earth is special, then that suggests that maybe there's a creator out there, and we're in a special place.
I was hoping he'd fucking move that right here, so he could take my bishop with the pawn, and I can stick my dick in it, and I can ear his rook.
And so he pushed back on that, and he said,
suck my dick, bitch.
I believe that the universe will look the same, no matter where you are within the universe,
you suck my
on a large
dick,
enough
bitch.
scale. Or another way of saying it is,
God,
the Earth is not
damn it.
special, and everyone must see the universe alike. Now, this has a name now, it's called the cosmological principle. But I think the simplest way to sum it up is to say
bitch.
they believe the Earth
You
is not
suck my
special.
dick, bitch.
Okay. Does the Big Bang correctly explain, then, some of the observations that we make, the things we see in the universe today?
Well, we're told that it does, but there are many, many things
Suck
in fact,
my
where
dick,
the Big Bang
bitch.
fails
God,
to explain
fucking
the
damn it.
observations.
Suck
And
my
so
dick, bitch.
what happens is, because there's a philosophical commitment to a naturalistic explanation, various sort of rescue hypotheses get proposed to
Suck
try
my
and
dick,
patch up the
bitch.
bits where the Big Bang doesn't really quite work, and we'll talk about some of those in a little while. But I don't think that it really adequately
You suck my dick,
describes
bitch.
what we observe at all. In fact,
You
most
suck my
recently,
dick,
as you
bitch.
opened the
Suck
findings
my
of the
dick,
James
bitch.
Webb Space Telescope,
Now fucking take that
were
one
a
right here.
complete shock to the Big Bang community. It was not what they were
God
expecting to
fucking
see.
damn it.
Can you tell us about some of those discoveries and why they weren't expecting them?
Absolutely. So the
God,
James Webb
fucking
Space
damn it.
Telescope is it's a $10 billion telescope, an extraordinary project. Brilliant engineering, I might add. It's designed to work
Come on,
more in the
dick
infrared
sucker.
parts of the spectrum, which enables it to see beyond the
God
visible part
fucking
of the
damn it.
electromagnetic spectrum and to see galaxies that are so shifted in spectrum that they would be very, very remote. In fact, in the Big Bang model, that would represent galaxies formed at the earliest stages of the history of the universe. And it's a very clever design. It actually orbits the Sun, not the Earth, but in the same time that it takes the Earth to orbit. And it sits at a place called the Lagrange point number 2, and it's a gravitationally stable location. It actually orbits that location so that the Earth is always between it and the Sun, so it doesn't get blinded by the light of the Sun. And it points these very sensitive infrared instruments at the remotest parts of the universe.
Suck my dick, bitch.
So, very early in the Big Bang, gravity would not have had, or should not have had, enough time to draw all of this material that had formed from the initial energy in that singularity that commenced it into large, highly structured galaxies like our Milky Way. So they expected to find indistinct, fairly small, fuzzy blobs of stars, not high structure with spiral arms and central bars and all this sort of thing. But to their astonishment, they found massive, highly structured galaxies, and even fairly recently reported a supermassive black hole that is 10 times the size of the black hole at the centre of our Milky Way galaxy.
Can you explain what a black hole is, Mark? Because I've heard that question many times before. Do they even exist? What are they?
Well, a black hole is where there is so much matter within this very small region that the gravitational field around it is so intense that not even light can escape it. So surrounding every black hole is what's called an event horizon. And anything that passes through that event horizon disappears into the black hole.
You stupid motherfucker.
Now, various complicated physics tells us that they radiate and so on, so they can be detected. Very real, quite amazing phenomena. But they involve the accretion of a massive amount of mass. So you can't have a supermassive black hole at the outer edges of the universe where there hasn't been enough time for gravity to aggregate all of that material. Consequently, it flies directly in the face of the Big Bang model. We also haven't got enough time for those highly structured elliptical galaxies to form. So it really was quite sensational. One astronomer reported that he lay awake at night wondering if all he'd been doing for
I'm fixing to ear you, Rook.
Wow.
Pretty good question.
You suck my dick.
Maybe it is. But the point is, you see, that they begin with a fundamental assumption, and that is that there's no God, and they try to use naturalistic processes to explain the universe. And it really doesn't work well.
Yeah, it sounds like with each discovery that the James Webb is making, there's not enough time for that to be present.
You suck my dick, bitch.
Yes, that's right.
In light of these findings, are secular astronomers abandoning this idea of the Big Bang?
Yes and no. The Big Bang is a naturalistic model, and it's got a lot of investment in it. People have got their names attached to various parts of the model that they've developed. They have professorships and so it's pretty hard to let go of that. But there are other secular astronomers and cosmologists who don't subscribe to the Big Bang because they see the flaws in it, and they see how it doesn't really very adequately describe the observations that are being made. So there are other models around. One that was in vogue back in around the middle of last century was called the steady state theory, and that kind of went out of fashion when the Big Bang rose to ascendancy with the discovery of the cosmic microwave background radiation, and we'll talk a bit about that in a few moments. But interestingly, the steady state is making a bit of a comeback now, partly because of the findings of James Webb. And what people need, you see, is a lot more time for the age of the universe. So they're thinking, well, maybe our idea of the 13.8 billion years is just too short, because now we're seeing the edges of the universe with mature galaxies perhaps spin around a lot longer. Now, this happens to play havoc with other parts of the model, so it's highly contentious. So there are various varieties of it, and it really has opened the whole debate wide open in cosmological circles now.
Can you give us some examples of the big problems that this theory is failing to address and answer?
Well, yes, apart from the findings of James Webb, there are a lot of issues that the Big Bang simply doesn't answer. And one of them is called the baryon asymmetry problem. And that's just a technical term, but what it means is basically this. In that initial Big Bang, it was a highly dense point of incredibly intense energy, which then started to cool as the universe expanded. And as it expanded, that energy was converted into matter, initially in the form of hydrogen and helium gas and so on. Now, when energy converts into matter, in every experiment we have ever conducted, and according to theory, you should produce equal amounts of matter and antimatter. Now, antimatter is where you might have,
now, fuck up and overlook this.
Instead of being
so I can stick my cock up your
positively charged. And protons have negative charges, so they're the mirror image, if you like, of matter.
Is that how you'd explain antimatter? Because I was going to say, what's antimatter?
That's right, so it's like a mirror image.
Okay.
But if matter and antimatter come in contact together, they instantly annihilate with the release of energy as well. So if this energy had converted itself into matter, where's all the antimatter? Because all we observe in the universe is matter. And so that's a major problem. As I said, it's called the baryon asymmetry. Baryon are the component parts, if you like, of
I see a dick in your future. I see a dick.
Satisfactory explanation for
Dick.
that particular issue. That's just one of the problems that fails to address adequately.
Because we should be able to see, observe the antimatter.
What did you miss?
We should, if the Big Bang model is true, we should see approximately equal amounts of matter and antimatter.
Goddamn motherfucker.
Another one?
Well, another one is that as the hydrogen and helium, matter not antimatter, started to condense into stars, then the initial stars should have been of very light gases, hydrogen and helium predominantly. And they should have been the majority.
Suck my dick, bitch.
Over time, they would burn all their fuel, because when they get very, very large, nuclear fusion starts to take place.
You
suck
my dick,
it radiates heat and light and so on. And then when it burns out, some of them will collapse and become supernovas. And it's believed that that's the mechanism by which heavier elements are produced. Now, of course, in our world, we have lots of heavy elements, things like carbon, oxygen, iron, and so on.
Come on, you stupid motherfucker.
Way more than just hydrogen helium,
Come on,
of course.
Goddamn motherfucker.
And the problem is that these initial stars, which are called population 3 stars, should predominate in the outer edges of the universe. After all, they were supposed to be the first ones that formed. But there have been no population 3 stars observed. So the observations don't stack up with a very clear prediction from the Big Bang, so it's failed again. So the problem of the missing population 3 stars is one of yet another of the unanswered challenges for the Big Bang. And the third problem is called the horizon problem. One of the things that swung opinion towards the Big Bang was the discovery of what's called the cosmic microwave background radiation. And it was predicted, and then it was discovered by some scientists back in the early parts of the 1900s. And essentially what it is like an afterglow, and it was believed to be the afterglow of that initial Big Bang.
Yes.
And it was expected that it would have very hot regions and cold regions, and that
Come on,
the
you
hot
fucking
regions,
dick
for instance,
sucker from
would be
China.
like the fingerprints of what would subsequently become galaxies and so on.
Get that fucking whore out of here.
When it was observed, it seemed to be very uniform, very little variation in the temperature, because any body that radiates it will radiate according to its temperature. So hotter bodies will radiate more energy than colder ones. So by observing the amount of radiation coming, we can make a measure of the temperature. And it was found that the temperature distribution of the background radiation was incredibly uniform, like flat to 1 part in 100,000.
God fucking damn it.
Now, if you think about that, that's like trying to get a surface dead flat for 100 metres and not varying by more than 1 millimetre.
Goddamn motherfucker.
That's very uniform, right? And that was extraordinary. That was not a prediction of the Big Bang. That came as a shock.
Suck my dick, bitch.
And so the problem is this. You've got these hot regions and cold regions and that initial background radiation. How did the hot regions exchange their heat with the cold regions to make it all so flat and uniform? Because there hasn't been enough time for that radiation to get from one side of the universe to the other side. And that's what's called the horizon problem.
And have they tried to answer it?
Oh, of course. And there was a solution put forward in the 1990s by a guy called Alan Guth, who supposed that there was an event called inflation that occurred in an extraordinarily short time after the initial expansion of this singularity, lasted for
you stupid motherfucker.
Period, and during which the volume of the universe expanded massively by many orders of magnitude. Now, his model has it that would have evened out all of those temperature variations. But the problem is there's no mechanism in physics that would start such a process. No mechanism for it to end. That's called the graceful exit problem. And during this inflationary period, you have special physics happening. So, if you like, matter repels matter instead of attracting it, and weird stuff happens. Stuff which is not observed in the laboratory.
Sounds like another miracle.
Well, yes, it's pretty close to that. So, if you like, it's what you could call a just so story. Now, the thing with developing these ideas and stories is that they may sound plausible, but plausibility doesn't equate to truth. So just because a scientist can tell a vaguely plausible story doesn't mean that the problem has been solved by any means. In fact, I would argue that the whole concept of inflation is actually not plausible at all. It's quite contrary to any observable physics that we do.
Mm. So scientifically, it sounds like there are a lot of, quote, research problems that falsify the Big Bang.
Well, yes, and these things are not good science in the sense that the core issue is really not being confronted. Once again, it's because of a philosophical commitment to the idea that we must explain everything in natural terms. And that sounds reasonable if you're involved in science. But if you think about it, if you limit yourself to only naturalistic explanations, you are excluding right at the outset
I fucked his butt.
And arbitrarily any consideration of the supernatural. So if you exclude the supernatural from consideration, that's the same as saying there is no
God. Bring out that whore.
Which means that really it's just signing up to atheism. So the secular scientist really has a commitment to an atheistic worldview, expresses it in the way he interprets the evidence that he observes, and that fundamentally is what we see in the Big Bang model. That's its root, if you like, its origin.
Mm. Yeah. Does the belief then in this supernatural creator, God, in your opinion, does that line up with what James Webb is revealing to us? Do they make sense together?
Sucks.
Well, I think if we start with what the Bible says, which shows us that God is our creator, that he spoke the universe into being in just 6 ordinary length days, and that he created the sun, moon and stars separately, but after he created the earth, I think that whole unfolding of God's creative activity helps us to understand the observations much more effectively than the atheistic models do, the secular models. Because when you look at such things as what James Webb is finding, these incredibly detailed and intricate galaxies at the outer edges of the cosmos, it's simply God declaring his glory to us. And one of the Psalms, Psalm 19, it begins by saying, the heavens declare the glory of God. And I believe indeed they do, just exactly that. So, in a sense, it's a bit like God is showing off, if you will. He's showing us that he is an all-powerful, all-knowing, almighty, eternal creator God, And when we look at the universe around us, that is the conclusion.
Because that was fucking stupid.
So I think our response to that should be not one of, I suppose, arrogance and saying, well, God, we figured out how you made the universe and you did it with
you
this Big
stupid
Bang.
motherfucker.
Rather, we should come humbly before him in the light of the evidence that he's given us,
Stupid
and
motherfucker.
acknowledge that he is indeed the Creator God.
So if someone turned around and said to you, oh, well, that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, Mark, because, you're just kind of saying, God did it, and so that makes sense of what James Webb is discovering, what would you say?
Well, I don't think it's a cop-out. I think it's acknowledging the reality of what we see.
I think it's a goddamn
See, all the
cop-out.
observations are like signposts. They point towards the truth of the Scriptures. Now, science doesn't prove the Bible. In fact, you can't do that, because if you did, it would be like elevating science above the Bible. And that makes science the benchmark. It makes it the arbiter of truth. But it's the other way around. You see, you start with God's eyewitness testimony of what he actually did at the beginning, and we use that historical record as the means by which we interpret the evidence in the world around us. So,
You
rather than
stupid
a cop-out,
motherfucker.
it's actually acknowledging the reality that the best description of the universe that we see around us and that we can measure and observe with brilliant instruments like James Webb is that there's a Creator God out there.
Now fuck up and take
Did
that goddamn home.
creationists try to predict anything about what we'd see with James Webb?
Yes, indeed, we did. And on our website at creation.com, there is a paper that was actually released the day after James Webb was launched back in late 2021. And in it, I'll just read the passage. We said, the JWST, that's the James Webb Space Telescope, observations will further contradict and complicate evolutionary theories on the origin of the universe. And what we said would happen is exactly what's happened. They've now got massive problems to how to explain these huge, complex objects so close to the commencement, apparently, of the universe. Another leading astronomer, creationist astronomer, Jason Lyle, said this: I expect to see fully formed,
I
fully
see a
designed
dick in your
galaxies
picture.
at
I see a
unprecedented
dick.
distances. And that's exactly what was found. And he published that well in advance of the launch of the James Webb. He went on to say, I don't expect to see evidence of genuine population 3 stars, those with no heavy elements at all. Since I reject the Big Bang as the cause of the 3 lightest elements, I have no reason to believe that the universe was not created with some of the heavy elements already in it. So his prediction has been precisely confirmed. Once again, no population 3 stars, heavy elements found right at the outer edges of the cosmos. So, starting with the Bible, starting with God's account of what he did to create the universe,
You stupid
places the
motherfucking bitch.
creationist astronomer and scientist in a far more powerful position when it comes to trying to predict what we will
God
see
fucking
in the
damn it.
universe. And I think the work of James Webb has
Suck my
just
dick, bitch.
brought that to the fore like no other instrument. So just remember I
You
quoted
suck
Psalm
my motherfucking
19
dick, bitch.
earlier on, and let me read a little bit of it to you. The first 4 verses say this: the heavens declare the glory of God. And how true is that? The skies proclaim his handiwork. I don't know if you have ever stood outdoors at night on a moonless, cloudless night and looked up at the stars. Now, you can do it in a city. You have to do this out in the country where there's not much light pollution. But the sight is absolutely breathtaking. Truly, the skies do proclaim God's handiwork. And it goes on and says, day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. And I think, wait a minute, the stars don't talk.
Speech, knowledge.
Right, but it goes on and says, they have no speech, there are no words, no sound is heard from them, their voice goes out to all the earth, their words unto the ends of the world. So this is, if you like, silent speech. What the heavens are telling us clearly is that God is the creator, that he's all-powerful, he's all-knowing, he's declaring his glory and his might to us, and it is absolutely unmistakable. So King David, when he wrote those words, got it exactly right.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing that with us today. It's fascinating and so encouraging to see how the latest scientific discoveries are affirming what the Bible tells us about our world.
You're welcome, Jess. It's been a great pleasure.
You fucking piece of shit. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I see a dick in your future. I see a dick. 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 God fucking damn it. God damn it. I fucked his hole on time. On the time. Man, it feels so good to stick my dick up their butts. And twist! Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my motherfucking dick, bitch. Suck my fucking dick, bitch. Fucking bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. Fucking bitch. You now fuck up and move right here. You stupid motherfucker, you just fucked up big time. And you see, that fucking pissing me off. Oh. Man, that was fucking his butt. Man, that was fucking his butt. I fucked his butt. I stuck my dick in his butt and twisted. Move, whore. Move, you whore. Bitch, suck my motherfucking dick, you goddamn motherfucking bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. You filthy little bitch. Suck my fucking dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. Suck my motherfucking dick. Suck my fatherfucking dick.
Did you know that it's possible to land on Venus without a parachute or even a rocket engine? This is a unique feature of the planet discovered by the Soviet Union 5 decades ago. It was the result of a trial-and-error process that finally revealed the truth about the most interesting location in our solar system. This is what the Soviets found when they landed on Venus and why they never went back.
What they found on penis.
Venera is the Russian word for the planet Venus. It's also a series of 16 missions that sought to understand, discover, and map out Earth's closest neighbor. Dating back to 1961 and extending all the way to 1985, the Venera project was a series of space probes and satellites sent to Venus that would study the planet and gather more information. Ostensibly, this was done for science, but we can't ignore the political implications either. One of many ambitious plays by the USSR to assert itself as a more capable actor during the space race. While Mars tends to get all of the attention in the 21st century, back in the day there was actually much more interest in studying Venus. Why is that? Well, we can observe the surface of Mars through high-powered telescopes on Earth, so we had a pretty good idea that there wasn't a whole lot going on over there. Aside from a minority of fringe theories about canals on Mars, it was generally accepted to be a dead planet. But Venus, on the other hand, presents a centuries-old mystery. All that we can see from Earth is an impenetrable, unyielding cover of thick clouds. So, what lies beneath? If Venus has clouds, then it has a dense atmosphere, unlike Mars, which means that there could be life on Venus.
Shit.
The closer proximity to the Sun, combined with the insulated cloud layer, would indicate that it must be hot on
800
Venus.
degrees.
Tropical climate
spans
spans an entire globe covered with dense rainforests that support all nature of alien insects and reptiles, like a prehistoric Earth. This was more plausible than the Martian theory, but even still was not widely regarded by the scientific community of the day. The famous astronomer Carl Sagan had already popularized the notion that the unbreaking cloud cover of Venus was indicative of a greenhouse effect that had gone wildly out of control and superheated the planet, meaning that the world below the clouds would be nothing more than a scorched hellscape. But there was only one way to find out. As with all of the early milestones in the space race, the Soviet Union was the first to make an attempt to study Venus up close. The year was 1961. The Soviets built two probes, Venera 1 and Venera 2. This was a common procedure in the first decades of space exploration to launch missions in pairs, because there was still a very high likelihood that one of them was going to fail. You really have to appreciate the ambition of these primitive interplanetary flights. With nothing more than an adding machine to guide them, the Russian engineers strapped a rocket engine to their probe, loaded it on top of a ballistic missile called the R-7, and set course for Venus. Then they let it rip and hoped for the best. The good news is that both probes were able to fly within 100,000 kilometers of Venus. The bad news is that both probes experienced a full system failure before reaching their destination, and therefore no usable data was returned. Then in 1962, the Americans succeeded where the Soviets had failed. Their Mariner 2 probe flew within 35,000 kilometers of Venus and completed the first up-close observation of another planet. During a 42-minute scan of Venus, Mariner 2 gathered significant data on the Venusian atmosphere and the surface from both the night and day side. The findings confirmed Sagan's theory about the greenhouse effect. Mariner 2's microwave radiometer indicated temperatures of up to 459 degrees Fahrenheit or 237 degrees Celsius on the day side. Mariner 2 also found that there was a dense cloud layer that extended from 56 to 80 kilometers above the surface. Based on this data, NASA largely decided to pass on further exploration of Venus in the short term, considering it an environment totally inhospitable for either man or machine. So they switched focus to the Moon and Mars. But the Soviets were less convinced. They redoubled their efforts and prepared the second wave of Venera probes. They still had no idea just how bad things were about to get. It's 1966, and the Soviets have built a bigger and tougher spacecraft for Venera 3 and 4. It's now weighing in at over 2,000 pounds, equipped with a variety of instruments like a barometer, a radar altimeter, gas analyzers, thermometers, and a detachable pod that would serve as a descent module. The idea was that the descent module would parachute down through the Venusian atmosphere and take readings about the composition, temperature, and pressure all the way down to the surface. In reality, things got a little complicated. Venera 3 experienced another system failure along the way, but the Soviets' aim was true, so the probe still managed to hit Venus like a bullet and slam right into the surface, which became the first man-made object to ever crash into another planet. The USSR actually scored a hat-trick on impacting near Earth bodies. They were the first to crash on the Moon, Venus, and Mars. There's a lesson in there probably if you're going to fail. Do it historically, right? Venera 4 in 1967 was the closest yet to a success story. The probe made it all the way to Venus with all systems go and dropped the capsule down into the Venusian atmosphere. From here, the descent module successfully deployed its parachutes and drifted slowly down towards the surface. This was the first spacecraft to ever collect measurements inside the atmosphere of another planet. Data returned by the probe showed something very interesting. At high altitudes, the atmosphere of Venus is very similar to Earth on a warm summer day. Perfectly hospitable temperature and pressure, downright comfortable even. But the lower the probe descends, the more extreme the climate becomes, not only ramping up in temperature, but in atmospheric pressure as well. It gets so bad that after 90 minutes of slow descent, transmission from the probe goes dead. It's widely believed that the capsule was simply crushed like a beer can by the density of the atmosphere. So now we know that descending into Venus is like diving deep into the ocean, which is a strange concept to wrap your head around, that air could be so dense that it would crush a metal spacecraft. With this new information, the Soviets were nearly certain that their remaining Venera 5 and 6 probes would have no chance of reaching the surface, but they launched them anyway. In the meantime, NASA had launched another flyby mission to Venus with Mariner 5 in 1967. It wouldn't make contact with the planet, but it got close enough to confirm what Venera 4 had experienced, that the conditions on Venus were somehow even more extreme than what had been originally detected in the early 1960s. With that in mind, the Soviets launched Venera 5 and 6 back-to-back in January 1969. Both probes reported less than an hour of data each before meeting the same crushing fate as their predecessor. And yet the Soviet Union was not discouraged in their efforts. They would simply build even bigger and even stronger probes, and they were going to try again.
Now if I can just dick up
for their next round of Venera landing attempts, number 7 and 8, the Soviets made two very key modifications. For one, the descent module was built from a thicker metal with more insulation from an internal sphere of titanium to protect instruments from heat and padding to soften the blow of impact. And modification number 2 was pretty clever. The engineers wanted to minimize the amount of time that the probe was exposed to the environment, so they put an extra tie around the lines of the parachute. This would stop the parachute from fully opening as the probe fell through the upper atmosphere. Then the material of the tie was designed to melt at a certain temperature that would allow the parachute to deploy at a lower altitude. Although when Venera 7's parachute did deploy on August 17, 1970, it still didn't last very long. The material somehow got ripped or it just straight up melted, but either way the landing module ended up dropping like a rock, reaching a terminal velocity of 61 kilometers per hour before bouncing off the Venusian surface again. Based on that transmission, the observers back on Earth assumed that they were looking at yet another failure to reach the surface alive, but that was not the case. Even with a busted-up antenna, the lander was sending back information, and what Venera 7 found would confirm scientists' worst fears. The temperature recorded at the surface showed 475 degrees Celsius, or roughly 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to melt lead, and far too hot for any machine to operate reliably. And yet the Soviets were somehow undeterred. In 1972, they would try it all again with Venera 8. Miraculously, this mission would not face any technical difficulties along the way. The descent module touched down softly on the planet's surface with all of its instruments intact and recorded for just less than 1 hour.
So by now we know that the temperature on Venus exceeds 900 degrees. The pressure on the surface is equivalent to 92 times that of the atmosphere on Earth, which is comparable to being 1 kilometer below water. And if that wasn't enough, the lower atmosphere is filled with sulfuric acid, which is the stuff inside a car battery. Now, you would think all of this confirmed knowledge would finally deter even the most committed engineers, but the Soviet Union just didn't believe in quitting. I mean, until they literally quit being a union entirely overnight, the whole wall coming down thing, but we're not going there today. Where we are going is back to Venus, because Venera 8 revealed one last fact that was too good to pass up. Even with the dense cloud cover, there's still enough sunlight reaching the surface of Venus to take a photograph. For Venera 9, the Soviets made cloud cover, there's still enough sunlight reaching the surface of Venus to take a photograph. For Venera 9, the Soviets made a fundamental change to the probe's design. You can see this just by looking at it. There's some crazy stuff going on here. The descent capsule itself has been beefed up yet again. We are now tipping the scales at nearly 5 metric tons, but the standout features have to do with a new landing procedure. Given everything that we now know about Venus, we want to keep our probe's exposure to the environment as minimal as possible, and we also learned that even after being dropped accidentally and plummeting hundreds of meters, Venera 7 still managed to function, so what happens if we drop the probe intentionally? This is what's going on with the 2 rings. At the bottom is actually the landing gear, or impact ring, just a flat metal circle connected to the main body by a series of shock absorber legs, and at the top is the new aero brake. This is how we land on Venus with no parachute required. This thing that looks like a weird hat is all that's really needed to get the speed of the probe down low enough for a safe landing. That's putting the incredibly thick atmosphere of Venus to work. It behaves more like water than it does air. It's very trippy. Also, they did technically use a parachute just to slow the probe down in the upper atmosphere, like to get it down to subsonic speed, but the actual landing itself was a free fall, straight into the ground from 47 kilometers above the surface. Now, what about those cameras? This is the first photograph ever taken of Venus. It was captured on black and white film by Venera 9 in 1975, and what we're looking at is a field of broken, jagged rocks surrounded by a sand-like material. It's not exactly breathtaking. The photo is only interesting because it was taken on Venus, but I still think it's pretty cool. This is the view from Venera 10, an identical lander that arrived just a few days later, and now we are seeing flat ground, with hardly any of those chunks of rock, just the smooth top of what was probably once an ancient lava flow. Venera 11 and 12 were less eventful missions. They failed to return any interesting photos due to lens failures. This was one of the tricks of Venus. You have to protect the camera on the way down or it'll melt prematurely, but then you have to rely on an automated system to reveal the lens, which didn't always work. Venera 13, unlucky number, but highly successful mission in the year 1981. This probe returned the first ever color photo of the Venusian surface, and it's one of my favorites. Again, the surface around the lander is just flat, sandy rock, but you can see just a touch of landscape beyond. Highly successful mission in the year 1981. This probe returned the first ever color photo of the Venusian surface, and it's one of my favorites. Again, the surface around the lander is just flat, sandy rock, but you can see just a touch of landscape beyond. The probe landed near the edge of a cliff or the peak of a hill. You can get a sense of depth that makes it all seem more real and more alien at the same time. Scenes like this should make every person appreciate the Earth a little more, as most planets and moons in the galaxy probably look like Venus. All of the ones that we've found anyway, barren, lifeless rocks. Anyway, you can also see the base of the lander again here, and what is the deal with those teeth? They look almost purposefully brutalist, but the teeth served an